Welcome to Informatica University. My name is John Lira, and in this demonstration, part of the Informatica PowerCenter administration course is I want to talk about domain management. I'll tell you what that means in a moment, and we're going to be talking about the domain and the metadata repository where the users and groups reside, some system tables, and then knowing how to shut down and rename the domain and bring it up again. Now, this is serious. You don't want to do this too lightly. The reason is if you don't do the steps in the right sequence or alter things incorrectly, the domain, the gateway domain, may not be able to come back again. So let me just go quickly into Oracle. I have already brought up SQL Developer, and notice that we have various schemas here. Now, throughout our class and other demos, we have been concerned about the metadata repositories that developers have used, where the workflows reside, where the mappings reside. So we have, in other demos, learned how to back it up, how to copy it, how to run objects in it through Workflow Manager, etc. The schema we're concerned about now is the domain, where the information for the domain is. So again, we're looking at the domain metadata repository, and let me just point to it. Here it is. This is the domain metadata repository, DOM dev test. Recall that when you install the product, you were asked, when you were installing Informatica, it said, would you like to create a domain or join one? We had answered, let's create one. And then this is the name we gave it. So this was created, the contents were created during the installation. The schema existed before installation. So DOM dev test existed, but the contents, if you allow me to look at the tables, all this inside of it, all that is what was created when we installed the product. And as you can see, a lot of it is not something meaningful for us. ISP, there's quite a bit of tables that just don't mean much to us. Okay, so you can see that we have various tables. Let's see if there's any views here. Notice that we have various views, etc. And so what you have here is all the metadata. Now, notice that I also have another domain schema, DOM dev test. This one should be empty. So one of the things I will try to attempt is, let's assume that we need to rename the domain from DOM dev test to DOM dev test 2. Notice the schema exists, so how will we switch over? Now, I am going to do this in the same node. In real life, this makes better sense if we were actually, say, going from a development to a production environment and we need to recreate the domain, or we had problems, something went wrong and we had a backup and now we need to recover and recreate the domain. So I'm going to do this in the same node, but in practice, it'd probably be better if we had separate nodes. So DOM dev test is an empty schema. DOM dev test is what I've created. Let me now show you the administrator console, and notice that in the admin console you have the domain DOM in dev test. It says session expired. Let me log back in and logging back into the administrator console, and looking at the domain here. Notice the domain is domain in dev test. Don't confuse the domain name with the schema of where all the domain data is stored. So the domain name is DOM in dev test, and if you look at the properties of it, you can see that it is connected to the DOM_dev test, which is the Oracle username and schema. And it is also on a machine called node01 infa dev test. So we only have one machine, so that's where it's stored. At the left-hand side, when you click on the node, you'll see its actual name, infa dev test, and the port number. All this information that you're seeing me click on is stored in the domain metadata repository. When I go to logs, monitor reports, and security, these users, these groups, users, and roles, where are they stored? They're also stored in the domain metadata repository. So it's very important that this domain metadata repository is properly backed up and configured, because if we ever have issues, we need a good solid backup to recover from. So that's in general. Now notice that I have many services up. So there comes a point where right now I need it up to extract data out of it, but when I actually want to update or convert it, migrate it over, these services better be down so I'm able to do that. Okay? So I left them up right now, so I'm going to minimize the Oracle and the domain. Now let's look at some of the underlying things. Now I already opened up a text file, and notice what I have. First of all, I have environment variables that I set, so it helps me when I type the commands. And the first thing we want to do is export the users. From the existing domain, I want to execute the infocmd. Notice all the switches. The command is export domain objects. The domain, notice domain info dev test, that's the name of my domain. And then where do I log into? The username is administrator, password is administrator. And so what I want to do out of this domain is back up the users and groups. Then when I do that, I'm going to back up the domain. Look at the command, info setup. Again, machine name of the Oracle, the port number, and here is the schema, username and password. And if I scroll right up here, the domain that I want to back up is info dev test. So it's very clear that you get the right naming conventions. A lot of people make mistakes here, and garbage in, garbage out. So you're logging into the Oracle schema, and the domain you want to export or back up is domain in dev test. These are values. If you make a typo, there's no error. It's going to assume it worked correctly, but we will not be able to recover from this. So instead of typing domain in dev test, I typed domain XXX. You're not going to get any error. When we need to recover in the restore and update, you'll see that I will not be able to bring up the domain. So it's very clear that you understand the login to the schema and the domain. The domain must be typed in exactly as it is defined in the administrator console. Okay, so let's take it step by step. I mentioned that my services are up, so the first thing I want to do is execute this command. So I'm going to bring up a Windows DOS window, and I have already executed these commands here, and let me do it again, just make sure. So there it is. These variables are done, and the reason I do that is so that if I enter a command, say in this example infocmd, that it actually finds it, that I don't have to go to the bin directory. Okay, so now that the environment variables are set, the infocmd command is what I want to execute, and what I want to do is go ahead, copy and paste. And the reason I do this is because these are complex commands. So I create a text file first, and then I tested it. It didn't always work out this nicely. I tested it, and notice it says the fail, the user and file already exists. Use the option force to override it. Okay, so I'll type in force. It would have been just as easily good enough to just delete the file and recreate it. So there it is. Remember, I tested this before this demo, so I knew they work. So here the file existed already, and the file, the output is an XML file. So it's going to take a few moments. Now, that's going to export various objects from the domain, including the users and groups and a few other things. I'll show you the XML file in a moment. Now what? Now what I want to do is back up the domain. All that content, the domain that's stored in there, I want to actually back it up, and I'll do that next. And let's see, I'm going to get ready, and I'm going to go to my C drive. Notice that in my command, I put my XML file for users and groups. I put it under ctemp, list of users and groups. So that's what I want to go and see now. And I'm going to go to the C drive. There goes the commands, ran successfully. And now I'm going to go to the temp drive. And I called it, where is my file? List users and groups. That's the file name. If you don't believe me, there goes the file name, list users and groups. All right, so that is the file name. I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to use Notepad++ because it is XML. And you can see, you can take your own time to study this intimately. You'll see that I have the users, I have the groups, I have the roles. Quite a bit of information is stored in there. Okay, come on, it's a little bit slow, quite heavy. Come on. I wonder what happened. But I'll come back. So we'll see. We'll take a look at it. It's just an XML file, and it might be pretty long. That's why it's taking that long, but we'll see. Okay, so we'll come back. Now what do I need to do? Well, what I need to do now is, hold on. Let's see, did it open it up? There it is. Come on. Well, Murphy's Law. It's taken longer than I thought, and it's just editing that file, but we'll see. Okay, so what I want to do while that file is being edited, I want to back up the domain. So I'm going to take this command, and you can see it. It's the info setup. It's different than info-cmd. So you do have to be familiar with the commands. And from a prior lecture, I mentioned that there's a reference book called the Command Reference Book, and it will discuss the 4 categories of commands: info-cmd, setup, pmcmd, and the rep. So this time I want to execute this command, back up the domain. The machine is info-dev-test, port 1521. I'm going to log in to the Oracle schema using dom-dev-test. That's the username login. It is of type Oracle. And what I want to do is store the content in a file called in-dev-test backup XML. And the domain, again, is the name of my domain. So let me do this. And let's see. I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste this. And, okay, oops, same thing. Same thing. It already exists. So I have to use the force command to do that, but this time I'm going to delete it. I'm actually going to delete the file. There it is. Okay, notice the file doesn't exist. I'm going to re-execute the command, and I'm expecting a file called info-dev-test backup. And let's see, I want to show you the extension for it. It's going to be XML, but it's going to be another extension there. Let's see what happened while that command executes. Let me look at my text file. Let's see if it opened it up. Remember, I had a file that I was trying to look at, the users and groups. So let me edit it. There it is. So this is the one, the users and groups. If you take the time to study this and you know the tags, the HTML tags, you'll notice that you have the users. Remember QA4, QA5. So not only do I have the groups, but I also have the users. And if you keep scrolling down, you're going to see the roles. We need this file. You cannot delete this file because this is a file that we're going to add to the newly created domain in a moment. So I'm going to exit this temporary file, and I'm going to go back and look at my command. Let me minimize that, and I'm going to see if my command executed. There it is. So the backup succeeded correctly. And let's just go, I'm not going to open it because it is an XML, but here it is. What I wanted to point out is that it is XML, and it's a .mrep. Now, let's see. I'm going to see if I can open it really fast with, there it is. For some reason, it was much faster now to open a file. Now, I don't really understand every line here, and you don't either. The Informatica engineers, they understand this, and so we don't really need to understand this. And one warning, never edit the output files. Never think you can play tricks, edit, and then restore from them. With great care, you might be able to get there, but most often, you're probably going to corrupt it. All right? So now we've done a backup. Now, there's one more thing we got to do in Oracle, and I'm not going to do this for every table. There are some tables that for whatever reason in the domain that we're trying to back up, there's some tables that just did not get back up at all. The ISP master election, you can see by the data, it has the domain name. And so there's various tables that are not backed up, and those are the ones that you have to back up on your own. The way to do this, it would be, for example, right mouse click, and what you're going to do is export, and you want to export everything and give it a name. Again, I'm going to put it under temp, and I'm only going to do this for this one, and I'm just going to call it export. Let's see, that's pretty much it. Okay, finished. All right, there it is. So it's going to run, and what that's going to do, it's going to create a .SQL file. There it is, of that content. Now, we don't really need to do that. It means the reason we're doing it is because we want to preserve the content for the new domain. So notice what's in there. So we don't really need to actually back this up. it is a good idea. And of course, in your class, you'll be told which 5 tables we need to back up. But I just did it for one because it's not critical. We don't need that data. We'll lose it, but we don't need it in a new domain. And let's see. So we created that, and there it is. Okay, you can actually, again, edit it. And if you know SQL, let me open it with Word. Well, I'll just use Notepad. There it is. Okay, probably the wrong editor to use, but I just wanted to show you a better formatted way. All right, so there goes a table. All right, so there goes that. Let me close that. So now I have almost all of my components that I need. Now what? Well, now what I need to do is go to the administrator, and this is tricky. We actually want to migrate this domain called Domain In-Depth Test from the let me just show you. I'm beginning to stutter, so let me just show you. So this domain, we want to actually move it over from Dome Dev Test to the Dome Dev Test 2. This is why we've been doing this backup. Now, the tricky part is we need to shut this down. There's many ways to shut this down. In general, you begin with the dependencies. So we would actually go through every metadata repository and first shut down the metadata repositories. Then the integration services. And we got to do this for every service we have. We have a reporting service. We have the analyst, MRS. So you have to know the dependencies. So I would shut down, and actually here I am, I'm wrong. I don't want to shut down the metadata repositories. Why? Because the integration services use it. So in this case, it is first shut down the IS and then the meta. But yet I can't because we have some web services. So in this scenario, in mine, first I got to shut down the web services. So notice you shut down the dependencies first. So what I would do is first of all, go ahead and disable all these services one by one. And it may take 3 minutes, but it may take 15 minutes. It depends how complex your environment is. So let me just summarize. You want to shut down the services that are not depending on something else. So first, web services comes down. Then I would shut down the integration service and then the metadata repository service. Well, what about reporting? Well, that should have been shut down before I shut down the integration. So the thing is, you got to understand the dependencies because now I got the analyst service. And remember, the analyst service depends on the data quality data integration service. Well, where is that? There it is. So first, I should shut down the analyst service and then the data integration, etc. Now, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to shut down the domain. I don't have any users. No one that is going to get upset at me if I just shut it down. But normal procedure would be to notify everyone that at a certain time I'm going to shut down the domain. Remember, once you shut it down, no one can work on it. So because I'm pretty sure that no one is here working on it, there's no developers, no analysts, I'm just going to go ahead and shut down the domain. Okay, shut down domain. Now, if I'm going to do this, there's a faster way. So this is the correct, graceful way. Shutting down the domain. It'll take a long time because it has to go through all the process. And actually, let me do this way. This is the correct way. All right. Now, you see, it's going to shut all this down, so it's going to take a while. And I'm basically going to commit suicide. I'm going to blow myself up because I am in the domain. So what I wanted to show you that alternatively, I could have gone to processes, exited the administrator, exit all the components, gone to the services, and some of you know what I'm about to say. I could have gone to services and just shut down which service? The Informatica service. So again, I could have just done it through the service and it would have had the same effect and probably faster. So I showed you the graceful way. The other way is still good, and as an administrator, that's the way I do it when I know that no one else is using anything. All right? So under the services, you would have gone into it, looked for the Informatica service, and shut it down. Let's see where I'm at. Let me minimize a few windows. And where was I? Oh, let's go back to the administrator. Let's see. Notice some sort of error. It's going to eventually, I can't come back in here. It's going to blow myself up. Okay, now notice it does take a while because there's a resiliency factor to detect a false fake of a downtime. If you have high availability, it'll take even longer. And so we just got to give it time to gracefully shut down. This is why I like my way better. When I go to services and I shut it down, it's just much faster. Okay, so I'm going to wait for that, and because I do want to make sure that things are shut down properly. And it might take 3 minutes, it might take 4, it might take 20 minutes. It all depends how complex, and we'll see. We'll just wait here until it's done. Okay, the domain finally shut down. Notice I can't communicate with it anymore. And just to confirm, I go to the service, Windows, Microsoft Windows services, and I see that Informatica 9.1 is shut down. And as I said, that it would probably have been faster just to shut this down, since I know that I have no user communities using Informatica. But there it is, it's down, and I'll close the admin. And then go into Oracle, just to tell you what I plan to do is, remember that we have backed up the first domain, the Dome Dev Test, and let me just point to it, and we want to now bring it over to the, where's my Dome Dev Test? Here it is. Dome Dev Test will be brought over to Dome Dev Test 2. At the moment, Dome Dev Test 2 is completely empty, and we'll see that it won't be there in a moment. So minimize that table, and let me go to the command file. Remember, I typed these commands because, of course, it is so easy to make mistakes. So first thing is I'm going to restore. Info setup restore, log it into Oracle to Dome Dev Test 2, and make sure that you get the right file name. The output file that was recently backed up, it has to be the same one. Unless I've made any typos, this should just be able to copy and paste and hit return, and let's see what happens. Okay, when I do this, it should end up restoring this. So it's going to restore it hopefully to Dome Dev Test 2, and when that is done, we'll see what the outcome would be. Let me just, I have to sit here and wait. I can't do anything else until that is done. Okay, look, it says succeeded. So now it's restored. Let me quickly go to Oracle, and I need to refresh my tables, and usually it should work. Come on, where's my refresh? There it is. Or I could have logged in and logged out again, and remember what I'm looking for is the Dome Dev Test 2, and before I had nothing, now I have data. So everything that was backed out of Dome Dev Test is now in Dome Dev Test 2. There's a little issue still going on. If you look at the domain here, okay, oops, try again. Notice the domain to restore, there's no values. So I cannot run this. I could, but you're going to see that it says, sorry, something is wrong. I need to restore the data to this. So there's nothing there. I have restored the content, but I've got to go ahead and execute one more command. So let me just, to make sure that I'm completely out, let me disconnect out of the Oracle, just out of safety concern that I don't want to touch anything. And now what's next? Well, now what I want to do is execute the final command. And this is the most serious command. Again, in practice, this is where most people make a mistake. Okay, they type things wrong, and notice here, it is the info setup update gateway node, the Oracle machine, the domain dev test 2, and we want to log into Oracle, and this is a tricky part. The domain name is domain info dev test. This domain has to match the name of the domain from the one we backed up. If the one we backed up was called Fred, this must be Fred. This cannot be called Joe. And that's where most people make mistakes. So I'm going to copy. I've ensured that it's syntactically correct, at least I think. And we're going to then execute this command. And what's the real test? The real test that this worked is if we can now bring up PowerCenter up and all the necessary services. Remember, we had a lot. So as soon as this finishes, the next thing is to see if I can bring up the service. And for that, we need to go back to basics. It says executed. And what I need to do now is actually go ahead and start the Informatica service from the services window. And assuming this works, there it is started. Now that's only the Informatica service. No, it doesn't mean that I can start to use Informatica yet. So let me just minimize a few items right here as, let's see, okay. So let me just, the next thing now is I shut it down. The next thing is bring it up. Bring up the domain, which I try to do, and bring up the domain and check for services. So remember, this is time dependent, so I better go ahead and now see if the administrator console can actually come up yet. I have to wait 3-4 minutes. Nope, I cannot bring it up yet. Okay, so I'll just wait here. Let me check the services, make sure that in fact it is up. There it is. If in practice when you do this, the Informatica service goes down, you have a mistake. One of those commands that you entered was wrong. I can almost guess that it's the update gateway node. You did not back up the correct domain, and you're not giving it the correct domain name. That's usually the problem. Of course, there could be network issues, other issues, but I think that's the problem. And let me try it again now and see if I'm connected. Still no luck. Okay, so let's just wait here a few moments until it connects, and then we'll go in and see what the services are doing. Okay, let's try one more time and see if the administrator console is up. Notice, and be careful in your environment because sometimes it's very quick, but we really have a lot of services. You might even actually have more. So I noticed the admin console came up, so therefore at least part of the environment is up, otherwise I would not be able to log in. And remember, I have many services, so let's see which ones are up already. And again, it's just a matter of time until they all come up. So the administrator console is up, and we'll check the domain, we'll check a few users, and that would pretty much conclude this demo. So notice, not everything is green. Quite a bit of my services are green, but not everything. It's just a matter of time. So I notice the data integration service is up, it's green. The metadata repositories for PowerCenter. The analyst service is not up yet. Well, it can't until the dependencies are done. So the model repository, that's a good sign. That's up. The DIS. So pretty much the analyst should be coming up because it's dependent on the DIS and the MRS. And I see a web service. So again, it's just a matter of time for all these services. So the point is we have been extremely, extremely successful. We have moved over to a new domain, and that domain now is called Dome in Dev Test. So if you look at it, we are now using the Dome Dev Test. Let's go back to the admin console, and notice if I click domain right there if I click on domain, now notice I have a big environment here. So if I click on domain and go to properties, you should confirm that it is now using the new domain, Dome Dev Test 2. Okay, now one thing I did, if you recall, I did not shut down my services. The protocol or the methodology says make them inactive, shut them down, make them inactive. That's good policy. I did not do that. I just shut everything down. In real life, you might want to take it procedurally, make a service, shut it down, make it inactive, and then you would have to make it active and bring it up. Okay, so that concludes our demo for migrating over to a new domain, and thank you very much.